Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the Hurcan aircraft from Aerocar Control, and we are making great headway on this aircraft. Probably going to be done in about 2 to 3 more episodes. So hang tight and we will dive in to the build video number 3 of this aircraft. Alright guys, so in this episode, the first thing we're going to start on is we are going to get the front gear mounted in the aircraft. So obviously, as we've talked about, we're using Electron ER50s, the stock setup that is designed for this aircraft. You can hear my bird in the background. And that's what we're going to begin with, is that front gear. So we've got the gear to mount, we've got the nose door servo to mount. And that's going to be the first part of this video. So let's hop into this. Guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. Give the video a thumbs up. Next thing we're doing is putting the gear in. So we had to extend the gear in order to make that happen. Now the Electron gear pin, hopefully you can pick this up there. It's right here. It's got a flat spot. Now that flat spot is for the steering arm, okay? So keep that in mind. Some people have talked about having to put flat spots for the keeper screws. I haven't, but I haven't really had an issue with them at all. So we'll see on this plane. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing flat spots on the pin at all, but I tend to use some blue Loctite on the pin and obviously on the set screws as well. So first thing we need to do on this particular gear is we are going to get this arm, the control arm, installed, set screw installed, and then we're going to put our steering servo in and get the linkage all set up for the steering. Alright guys, so assembling the landing gear here, I'm just going to put the strut together, the front nose strut. So one thing to keep in mind that I talk about quite often is putting Loctite on stuff. So any metal to metal contacts, you want to make sure you do these 3 bolts holding the front wheel together. Now what I'll do in this case is I will take a little bit of light oil and just put a thin coat over top of the bushings in the wheels. Just really helps to make this roll nice and smooth. So this is the front axle that goes through the wheels. So all we're going to do is pop this in place. Now it's a nice snug fit. Install the axle. And with that oil, before, this wouldn't spin very well, and now it spins very well. And then we're just going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on that side. Don't have to go too crazy because it is an aluminum axle. Meaning that if you have too much Loctite in there, it's going to be a real bear to get that thing out if you ever need to. You're going to need to heat it for sure. So I just took it back out just to make sure that we have Loctite on the threads there, which we do. Okay, and we'll snug that down. Perfect. So a little bit of side-to-side play, which is good. It's a nice tight fit, so we have just a little bit of clearance on that front wheel, and but it spins beautifully, nice and smooth. So putting that oil on there is critical. Some people say those bronze bushings are self-lubricating. Fine and dandy, but I want mine to actually spin when it works. So anyways, next thing I'll do is I'm going to pull these bolts out here, and we're just going to put some Loctite on them and get those installed. Okay, so a couple things here with the front gear. So it would be nice to have a nice short linkage like this. Okay, so having the servo output shaft closer to the gear output shaft. Problem is when this thing extends, I'll show you.
it would be very, very close, and it probably wouldn't fit for the servo lead coming off, so that would hit right there as it's extending. So we want to make sure we have the servo lead going away from the gear itself. All right, so got this set up, and now this linkage setup, we are perfectly in line there, which would work very well if we were using a clevis and a clevis, but we're not using a clevis because these are already drilled out for ball links. So what I need to do is I need to take this servo and actually put it on the top side, and the reason for that is this will get raised up, and then we'll be able to put a ball joint and have it come straight to the clevis. So I'm going to undo this servo, put it through on the top side, and that will solve our problem there. Alright guys, so here's our setup on the nose wheel. Now one thing I see a lot of people do on their builds, maybe that's a bit of an overstatement, but a lot of people will cheap out on their nose servo. I will use the exact same servo on my steering as I will on my rest of my surfaces. So here we have a JR8911, exactly the same servo I'm using on the rest of the aircraft. Steering is very important and a critical item. So anyways, what we've done here is we've used a Dubro 256 swivel ball link. Now this is a 440 rod version, so the kit does not come with steering linkages here. So this is something you need to put together yourself. So we've got the ball joint installed on this end. There's 3 holes on the actual linkage. We're using the middle hole. We've got a stainless steel 440 rod from Sullivan. And then we've got a Sullivan Golden Clevis. When I did my ball joint and clevis testing, the Golden Clevis has outperformed everything else imaginable. So great units. So anyways, we've centered the servo in the controller. We've installed the linkage on the rod flat spot. Now the actual leg is not done up yet, so that will need to do up. But right now I was just getting this all 90'd out and nice and square. So when I'm doing this, obviously the leg, like I mentioned, has not been tightened up yet. So what I'm looking for here is 90-degree angles. So square, square, square. And once that's done, then I'll install the clevis in my nylon rod and just snip that off. Now these are the JR Super Servo horns, the nylon ones. Great servo horns for clevises, not for ball joints because it puts side force on it, but for clevises, these work awesome. So that's our linkage setup for the nose gear, and there's full travel both directions. So we've got a decent amount of steering, and I just hooked the gyro up in the GS200 controller just to play around with it, but there's the gyro in action. Before I bolt something like this in, generally what I'll do is cycle the gear while it's installed and I'm holding it. Now the reason for that is we don't have pre-done mounting holes. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got this gear in the right position and it's not going to interfere with anything. I mean, we can run the gear back a little bit, forward all the way. We've got some angle side to side. Visually, if I line it up with the slots in the gear opening, to me it looks crooked. So I'm just going to get this all hooked up and then basically cycle it with my radio just to double check and make sure that we're kind of in line here. And once I find the right spot, I mean, there's not tons of play in here, but there's enough that if I line it up like this, it looks crooked. If I line it up crooked to the line, it looks straight. So I'm going to line this up and see what I come up with. Okay, so on the very first cycle, this steering arm right here, just this extra little piece sticking out, that was actually hitting our little door keeper there. So there's a little piece of carbon laid in there, and it was hitting right about where my finger was. So we have a couple options. Number one, we could just file down the carbon. Option number two is we can grind down the arm a little bit. Now this arm is too long to begin with. I know I'm not going to use that furthest out hole, so I think step number one for me is I'm going to cut this arm off, see if that works, and we do have the inner hole. We may go to the inner hole as well too. So we're going to cut that off first. We'll see what happens for spacing, and we'll go from there. All right, so where I have it now actually works quite well, but our linkage is very close to that piece of carbon. So the arm itself is good, but because our ball joint here is sticking out a little bit past, that's a little bit close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the inner hole. I'm going to move this in probably 1 or 2 holes. We'll see how that works, and then we'll probably end up just trimming a little bit of the servo arm off. So just little things you want to play with. Don't go crazy at first and just cut everything open and off, because you may regret making those quick changes. Always make small changes first to figure it out. Okay, so final result here. We've put it on the inner Electron hole on the gear itself, and we've moved it in 2 holes on the super servo horn. So we're 1 out from the inner hole, and 2, we cut 2 holes off from the outer. So that's moved everything in substantially. We still have lots of steering on this front wheel, which is great. So let's install this and see how it looks. And getting the gear in on this plane, it's fairly simple as long as you do it the right way. It's just like that. Okay, so now we'll plug our gear in. Just to make sure everything's centered, we're going to plug our steering in. Okay, so on my first trials here, what I was doing was lining it up with the actual opening in the former, and that actually seemed to work out quite nicely. So I'm going to get it back to that spot, and let's try and retract this and see how it works. Beautiful. So you guys probably can't see it, but we've got a lovely amount of clearance on that piece of carbon now. Great, everything's nice and clear. And then we'll just check our steering and make sure we still have lots. So still plenty of steering. So now all I'm going to do is basically drill 1 hole from the bottom. Now I am going to use blind nuts on this gear. Maybe not the mains, I'm not sure yet, but we're going to use it on the front gear. And so that's the next step to completion here of this gear. Now if I was building this plane again, one of the things I would change is before I put the fuselage together, I would have installed the front gear in the fuselage, because it's going to be a heck of a lot easier when you can flip this thing upside down. Now if I had more room and another person to help me, I could flip this thing upside down on a stand and then we'd be able to access it, but unfortunately I don't, so we're going to have to do everything from the underside, which kind of sucks, but we'll make it work. Alright, so drilling the holes wasn't that bad. I just held the gear in place like I was showing you, marked it from the underside with a paint marker, and then just used the appropriate drill bit size, making sure I was right on my center of my marks, and it all worked out good. So, next thing I had to do was sand down 1 nub of the blind nuts, because it was overhanging the gear opening. And now what I'll do is I'll get these installed, we'll sink the blind nuts down, and check the operation. Alright, so before we sink those blind nuts down, always a good idea just to check and make sure that you're happy with the position of the gear. So let's cycle this thing and see what happens. That looks good. We'll go back up. Awesome, and when I stand at the front of the fuselage like this, look down the fuselage, we're nice and straight, and let's take a view when the gear's down. Alright, and there's a shot with the gear down, we're nice and centered in that nose. Don't worry about the left and right of the actual nose wheel, but that looks wonderful. So now that I know that we're in the right position, I'm going to tighten these mounting bolts down to sink those blind nuts in. Once I have some epoxy mixed for something, then I'll just put a little bit of high sol or epoxy on these blind nuts just to keep them in place so they don't back out. Not a big deal on this plane because we got tons of room, but just good practice in my opinion. All right, so one of the problems we have here now to deal with is the door not closing. So basically this part of the hinge right there hits the Electron gear. Now, what could I have done to do this differently? Well, I could have put the gear more towards the rear of the plane. Problem then becomes this getting close to that. So let's cycle this gear and see if I would have had more room to move that down or towards the rear. So not much. Our servo arm almost hits right there. So I may have been able to move it back far enough, but unfortunately now we can't change it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to file down this hinge on both of them, and hopefully we'll be able to get enough just to get that to close. So I'll show you guys the results. All right guys, didn't need to take tons off. Actually it was mainly the little bolt hole or the little bump out here that was actually the final interference. So anyways, that's all done. Just grinded a little bit of that off and now it closes beautifully. All right guys, so I know I've talked previously, I think, about the wing electronics plug-in and being a little bit concerned that it has to be in this location by the wheel well opening. Now, I've got a solution for that. I just was examining the wings and we've got a solution. So I didn't notice this before, but if you look right in the center of the screen, there's an opening underneath the wing tube, which is great because that opening brings us towards the front of the wing. And if I tap on this, it's also just a hollow piece of fiberglass there. So if we go look at the fuselage portion of this area, which is right in this area, that basically matches up, I think, to the wing. So if I measure from this wing tube, front of the wing tube, over here, this is the triangle area right there. Probably might not show up on camera, but you can kind of see through it. I think this matches up to the wing. So that is awesome because that means we have the ability to put a hole right here and then we can match that hole to the wing side and our plug-in and stuff can be here. So problem solved. I was quite concerned about that, but obviously we have a good solution and just the hole's not pre-done, right? So you got to kind of figure these things out, but I'm glad I waited. It's always good to wait in situations like this, in my opinion, just to wait, figure it out, and see if there's something you can do to make it work. All right guys, well, it's the little things that get me excited, and there is our access hole right there. So that worked out absolutely awesome, and it matches up to the fuselage. Now, the leading edge has a piece of wood that goes all, well, I'm assuming all the way down the leading edge. It's right there. So it's going to be a little bit tricky when we get our Sky Candy landing lights that are going and Osario custom housings that are going in the tips on the leading edge. So it's going to be a bit tricky to get these lights run through, but I'm sure we'll find a way. So really exciting. So now what we get to do is we know that if we put a hole in the center of the fuselage triangle, which is right there, we can run our wires that service the wings right through that hole. So that's the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the grommet mounted on each side of the fuselage, and we're going to start running the wires for the wings. All right, so the wiring harness on the fuselage side is done on both sides. We've got all of our wires marked here. We've got our wires marked on the other side, the wing side, so those all match up, and we know what we need to do on the wing side. And we've got our wires marked on this side. So I also installed some wire organizers here as well too on both sides of the fuselage. So those wires are going to come this way, and then they're going to disappear underneath the tank, which is awesome. So essentially, you're hardly going to see any wires in this airplane, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. All right, guys, so there is a shot of the finished wing wiring. So nicely comes underneath the tank. I'll throw the tank in here and show you how it just disappears. All right, so slide that tank in, and that's basically what it looks like. So absolutely awesome. I think it's going to look great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the lighting items underneath this tray here, the turbine tray. And so all that's going to disappear, and we can shorten all those leads up. But this is all the lighting hardware so far that goes to the wings and rear section. So next thing I'm going to do is just route these wires for the receiver, or these wires are going to the gyro. Those I'll route forward down these channels here, and the main rear portion of the wiring in the fuselage is done. All right, guys, so one last step here on the wings. I actually totally forgot about the gear leads. So we've added one more connector, the 6-pin connector, which works out well because we took the white wires off of the power box wire. And we're using the blue and the red, and we've got them spaced out with a blank in between so it lines up with the way the gear is mounted or power is run. So that's done, and you can see it run inside on the whole system there. So we've finished that step. All right, so just doing a bit more organizing here. Ran the wire for the turbine. That I ran underneath with everything, so it's nice and organized and clean. That comes right to the ECU, or data relay module. Also ran the 3mm Festo line, 4mm Festo line up front here. Now what I'm doing is I'm getting ready to mount the ball valve, which is included with the Sweewin engine, and I'm using one of my ball valve mounts here. Now just remember, these ball valve mounts come with an awesome drill template, and the drill template's handy because you've got the actual bolts that hold everything together, bolts and nuts. So it's nice to have those marked so they're easy to drill out. So we're going to mount the on-off valve right there. Our fuel filter is going to go right after the on-off valve, so right there, so everything will be nice and tight, and then it's just going to go right down to that line going back to the engine. So I think this is a very good time in the video, guys, to give all of you a shout out who have already supported to the Shop Build donation fund. So there's a bunch of links down below. Thank you everybody who has donated already. We've managed to raise so far about $2,700, I think, at the time of recording this. So awesome. Thank you guys, whether your donation was big or small, doesn't matter. Every little bit counts and helps. So thank you to everybody who has already donated. All right, guys, so in one of the previous videos for the Huracan, you guys were asking for how to tie wire fuel barbs and fuel connections. So there's a specific tool for it. I don't use it. I find forceps to be actually a lot easier, and so it's a pretty simple process. I'll just show you on these big barbs here. So I always just cut way too much. I've had this spool of, I think it's a couple pounds of stainless steel lock wire. I like the 0.020 stuff, which is the thinnest stuff, and I've had this, I think it's a pound or two, 1 pound. There's still probably half a package in there. I've had it for about 10 years, so you'll always have lots. Anyway, so you take this, always do a double wrap, okay, and then I just grab it with forceps. I think that's what these are called. Anyways, just grab it, nice and tight, and then I just spin it. And on a big fitting like this, if you spin too much, it'll just snap, so you don't have to go too crazy. And then I just cut it off with my pair of small pliers or side cutters, and twist it backwards. Now when I twist it or fold it over itself, I'm always folding away from the tube. So the tube that actually holds the liquid, I want to fold the other direction so it's not rubbing or anything. Probably doesn't really matter, but that's just one of those small little things that I always do. So simple, fairly easy, and as long as you have lots of space, this tool works easy, works well. It also works well in tight spaces too, but this is a pretty easy spot. So. All right, so I feel a little scattered on this part of the build, guys, but basically just kind of organizing everything and just kind of making sure it all works out. So next thing I did here was get the BPX 16 BPX Pro centered. You can see my little screw hole marks there, so I already drilled just a tiny little hole, so I was marked. And then I just laid out the through fittings here and traced them out with Sharpie marker, and then just took my Dremel and basically made the holes. So now we've got our through holes here for all of our wires on both sides of the BPX Pro, and then this is the one in between the gyro and the BPX Pro. So pretty much decided on my final layout here. We've got this stuff mounted right there. The holder for the one receiver is going to go right there. And then our GSU screen is going to go right there. So the base line here is kind of in the center line, and this is one of the units that flips up. So that's how it's all going to be laid out on the top. I actually toyed with having this screen down below, but I am mounting the Electron retract unit, the main brain, down there. Really don't need to see that screen very much. The stuff up here is kind of the important stuff, especially the turbine screen, which I like to see every single time I start the turbine. So that's going to be the stuff that's down there, and that's the stuff that's up top. All right, guys, so I got everything mounted on top of the main area here. So we've got our BPX, which is our main system. This one receiver is going to go right in this area, and then we're just going to hide that wire underneath right there. We've got all of our wiring from the back end coming forward. Now some of this is gear wiring, so that will go down to the gear controller down below. We've got our Cortex, so those wires are going to go through this through fitting right here, and they're going to come up to their appropriate ports. And I ran this as tight as possible so all those wires would reach their appropriate areas, because I want to keep this as clean as possible. We've got our other receiver right here. Wire goes through a little rubber grommet, and then we've got our GSU on one of these adjustable supports, which works out perfect. So and then we've got the wire going through a rubber grommet. Now the reason I set everything up for myself on this side of the plane is this is the side that I'm always starting on. So I will always be standing right where I'm standing and be able to look at my GSU right there, which is perfect. So that's why I run things the way I do. So then looking down here, we've got our gear controller down there. I've settled on putting it down there because we don't really need access to it for starting up and stuff. And honestly, I just wanted this to be nice and clean, and that's the way it is. So that worked out good.
All right, guys, so one of the things that really excited me about this kit was Ozzy from Osario Customs, link down below in the description, and Sky Candy Landing Lights, Sal. They were working on something amazing for this aircraft. So I was very excited when I heard that they had come up with a wicked solution for the lighting system on this plane. So let's take a look at what got sent. So we've already in this video taken a look at the belly light, which has already been installed. We've looked at the wingtip lights, which we looked at in the very first video, and those are phenomenal. The next stuff showed up, so let's dive into this, this box and see. So first thing, big decals. Thanks, Sal, for those. One of those is going up in my trailer, and one of them is going to go up in the new shop. So thank you for that. So we've got these molds of, these are the cutout molds that work with the lighting system. So this will make more sense shortly here. So one of the things that is really great with all of Sky Candy's landing lights, guys, is when Sal does these up, they're all pre-wired, they're all plug and play. So basically, when you put this in the plane, everything is labeled. You know exactly where everything's running to, and it just makes perfect sense. When Sal puts these kits together, they are plug and play, they're phenomenal, they're super easy, and you basically don't even have to think, you just basically plug your lighting system in. So now these lights are going to be run off of a 4-cell LiPo, so 14.8 volts, and then there's a bunch of Castle Creations BECs or regulators built into the system for the Sky Candy white lights. So the piece de la resistance of this kit are these amazing headlights. Look at those things. So they are a thing of beauty. So you can see IGYRO logo there and Sky Candy landing lights right there. So these use 2 of the Sky Candy 7/8 landing lights right there. There's a retainer screw holding these in place, and they came like this, so pre-painted, lens already installed. Now, if you're not familiar, this plane is called a Huracan. Lamborghini makes a Huracan. I'll throw a picture in here. This is basically a model or a replica of the Huracan lights. So I'm not going to show these to you guys installed on the wing in this video. That'll be the next video. But this is just the initial look at these lights. So what we're going to do in the next video, just a heads up, is we are going to give away a set of Sky Candy landing lights, so the white lights that are inside. So make sure you check out the next video coming out next week for details on that giveaway. So the other thing we've got here is a nose gear light. Now I've taken some initial looks at the layout here, and unfortunately the landing gear is set very low in the fuselage, so I don't think this light will work. I'm going to do some thinking on this to see if there's any workarounds, but we do have a nose gear light as well too. Now these housings that Ozzy did up, these are insanely simple, so we'll take more closer look at this when we do the install, but basically these slide over the leading edge. We've got little pinholes there to put some holding pins in place. So we get these all lined up, put some pinholes in, trace this out, and this tells us exactly where we need to do the cutouts in the wing, and then the actual light housings should just slip right in. Very, very cool. So thank you, Sal from Sky Candy, for doing these amazing whole system up for me. Thank you, Ozzy from IGYRO Custom, for creating this for the Huracan. If you guys are getting a Huracan, I highly suggest you reach out to Ozzy and check into these lights. They are, like I said, a thing of beauty. So we've done a couple of little things here. So got the servo mounted. The output shaft I put towards the gear. Now the reason for that is when we put the servo horn on this output shaft, it's going to be overhanging the opening, which is good. So as it moves down, it'll clear itself out of the way. Also gives the most amount of clearance for the rod itself. Now if you look at the end of my finger there, I have also mounted a piece of black G10. It looks like carbon, but it's just black G10, and just actually took that off of an old helicopter frame and kind of made my piece and basically stuck it in the plate in the right spot. So I do need to eventually drill a hole through it for the control rod, but that stuff is in place. All right, guys, and that is going to be everything for this episode of the Huracan build. Thank you so much for tuning into the build. We got a lot accomplished in this episode. Next episode, we are going to be moving to the wings and installing the amazing Sky Candy landing lights. But the next episode will be focused all about the wings, and then we'll probably come back to the fuselage and finish everything up on the fuselage. So I kind of envision there being 2 more episodes to complete this aircraft. So thank you to everybody who has donated towards the build a new shop cause. Let's build a new shop cause. Appreciate your guys' donations. Thank you so much in advance.
love seeing the support, whether it's a small amount or a big amount. We're doing awesome and we're raising some good money. So thank you guys for tuning into the build. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below if you have not done so already. It is free to do so, and we will see you guys in the next video.